Hello, friends, and welcome into Church Pew Sports. I'm Bill Hobson, and it's entirely likely that if you made it to this point, it's because you saw the name Matt Millen in the subject line for the video. And before we get to my interview with Matt, and it's fascinating, just a little invitation and introduction to Church Pew Sports, the podcast where pastors talk sports and life and faith. We have been at this for a few years now and had some great guests on, although none of them until now have had 4 Super Bowl rings. But we enjoy connecting all of these elements together, sports and life and faith, and we have a lot of fun doing it. Now, the conversation you're about to hear with myself and Matt Millen isn't really geared so much around fun as it is around his story. But I would encourage you to go wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever it is, and subscribe to Church Pew Sports, or go to our website at churchpewsports.com, because every week, in a very clean, family-friendly way, we have great times talking sports and connecting mostly a male audience, not everybody, but mostly a male audience, to matters of sports and life and faith. So that's your invitation. That's our introduction. I'm normally joined by my co-host, Paul Miller, but for this conversation with Matt Millen, it's just Matt and myself. And I know you'll enjoy hearing from one of the NFL's legendary figures, Matt Millen, here on Church Pew Sports. Between myself and our featured guest today, we have 4 Super Bowl rings. That's pretty impressive, I would say. The fact that Matt Millen has all 4 of them isn't important right now. It's just to focus on the teamwork. And there was a period of time not very long ago, about 3 years ago, where I don't know if there was even money on whether or not Matt would still be with us right now. And so I'm really excited to welcome him into the show. And Matt, thank you for doing this. And let me start by just asking how you feeling these days, because you've been through the ringer.
Yeah, so actually it's 5 years already.
5 years. Wow.
Yeah, it's 5 years. I was 60 at the time. And so and actually and previous to that, it took about 10 years to diagnose what I had, because it's a weird disease. So it was a little bit of a different time, but they diagnosed it, and I got the heart transplant, and then things so far so good. So fingers crossed.
You spent a fair amount of time just flat on your back waiting for the transplant to be possible. I can't imagine, for a guy that is from the background, the athletic and competitive background like you, that had to be like a confinement to the nth degree. Do you do you have flashbacks to all those days in the ICU, just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting?
Actually, it was 100 days that I was in, and it just is what it is. So there's nothing you could do about it. You just kind of deal with it. It didn't bother me. Um, it's not like I could get up and walk around anyway. So it wasn't like it was, it was just what it was. So you had to deal with it. So that's what you do.
Yeah. And, and at the same time, it gives you a lot of time to reflect, right? And think about the things in life that really matter, the family and faith. And I'm kind of curious as to whether or not in your heart, those things were reinstated or shuffled around a little bit, because you had a time to kind of do some serious thinking and do some serious business with your creator.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know me very well. So I just get right to the point. And some people are good with that, and some people aren't good with that. I'm the same way in my prayer life. And so it wasn't a long conversation. We so what I just said, Lord, if you want to take me. I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that. So if I'm going to be dead, I'll be dead. That's all right. I'm going to get there eventually anyway. And if not, then you're going to give me more time. I'll take that. Just kind of let me know. And so literally that night, I just had, it sounds weird. Any person of faith would understand. I had he just said, "Hey, you're fine. You're going to be fine. Don't worry about it." So I said, "Okay, I'm not going to worry about it." And that was it. It was kind of pretty much over pretty quick. And I just believed it would get done, and it got done. So I didn't have any anxiety. I didn't have any worry. It's not like I didn't even give it much thought, to be perfectly honest with you. But after I kind of got the word, that was it, and I moved on.
Was that faith already a part of you coming into that crisis, or was it sort of a hospital conversion, so to speak?
No, I've been a believer since I'm 19, and so I don't always act like it. There's a couple of people who've been punched for it. There's been a couple of people who've been snatched by the throat. I make a lot of mistakes. I have a good Irish. I have a good Irish side to me. I got a quick trigger sometimes, but through the whole thing, no, it's been a journey. And so, like anything else, it's just doesn't just happen overnight. So, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. You talk about those moments, those snapshots in time where people are taking the still photos of the throat grabs and all those things. I got to hear some Raiders stories, man. I am such a fan of the prior generation of the NFL, when you could hit people, and when the quarterbacks weren't made out of fine china and all that. What in the world was it like when you got drafted by the Raiders? And
Right.
I can't imagine day one when you walk onto that practice field. I'm picturing Alzado. I don't know who all was around you, but they already had a reputation at that point. What do you remember about the early days there?
Yeah, so I got drafted early and went right out there, and I was not a Raider fan. I was a follower of pro football, but I only liked players. I would follow certain players. I didn't have a team that I liked or anything like that. All I knew is, well, the Raiders were good in '76, and now this is 1980, so it's 4 years ago. Those days are gone. There's still some good players there, but they were picked to be dead last in the conference and in the division. So heck, all I knew is I'll just go out there and they want to put me at linebacker, because I started as a linebacker at Penn State. I started my freshman year and for 8 games. And then my sophomore year, I was 255. So they put me down, put my hand in the dirt. And then
At 255.
Yeah, I was a defensive end.
Yeah.
And so then then I got to 275 and I got drafted by the Raiders. And so now I'm 275, and what linebacker in the league is 275 pounds? The answer is none. So they made me a linebacker, and I dropped down to about 260, 265. And that's where I stayed for 12 years. I kept that weight. I played a different game, and the league was a different league, and rules were different rules. And so it was actually, when you look back on it, it's probably the best time for me. Now, the late Dick Butkus and Ray Nitschke were 2 guys who I would talk to, and in their words, they said, "Matt, you missed your time. You should have been in our era." But I was still in a good era. It was still a good time. And so, Bill, I'll tell you something, and this is 100% the truth. I walked into the Raiders training camp. It was in Santa Rosa, California. We were at this dumpy place, and it's not like it is today, where you have these unbelievable facilities. And so I go up to Santa Rosa, and we have it looks like an old garage, but a long one, and it's our locker room. And there's a sign on the front door Ted Hendricks put up there, and it said, "Raider rules. Rule number 1, cheating is encouraged. Rule number 2, see rule number 1." That was my indoctrination to the Raiders. So I'm looking at this, and I kind of chuckled and I laughed, and I went in and I thought about that, and what does that tell you? What does that mean? Really, what that means is find a way to win.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying. And so I said to Hendricks, we called him Kick 'em. We called him Kick 'em because he got into a fight when we were in Denver. And Ted couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. He got into a fight with Riley Odoms, an old tight end, big, powerful guy. And and Ted gets into this fight, and he's getting his rear end kicked. And at the end of it, we try to pull him off. And so he starts kicking a guy. He starts kicking him in the head. So we start calling him Kick Him in the Head Ted. And then we just cut it to Kick Him. So we called him Kick Him. And the message from him was, hey, you figured it out. You're not as dumb as I thought you were. So it was find a way to win no matter what it is, right? Yeah. And if you have to bend the rules, we never broke them, we bent them. If you had to bend the rules a little bit, then that's what you did. And so that's the way it was played. That's the way the game was played. I think the Raiders tried to say that, they were the ones who invented that way of playing, but really that was the way the league was at the time. Yeah. It was that way.
Well, being a fan of the bad boy Detroit Pistons, right? Sure. That was the same thing. That's the way the league was at the time, but they also brought about a number of rule changes, mostly to protect Michael Jordan. Right. Did that Raiders unit bring about a bunch of changes, the roughing the quarterback and that kind of, because at that time, what was roughing the quarterback at that time in 1980?
Next, I don't know, was
running over with a car?
You could beat the snot out of them. And they did not. They would be like, hey, easy. And that would, it's not like it is now. It's not even close. No. So, you could get after them pretty darn good.
I was watching the Lions game Monday night, and Alex Anzalone came in, kind of got tripped up, landed in the legs of Garoppolo, and
they're going to call that every time.
And they did. They got him. It was below the knees and all that, but they got him every time. And I thought, I knew I was going to be speaking to you, and I thought Millen's got to be sitting on his couch watching this game, thinking, "That's nothing."
Oh,
that was unintentional. We used to do that on purpose.
Oh, absolutely. You kidding me? There are some things that happened when we were hitting quarterbacks, and it was, honestly, it was brutal. You did not want to be a quarterback in that time period. And if you did it, if you lasted, you were one tough guy.
Who was your D-line at that
time?
Our
defensive line, well, it depends. When I first started, it was Matuzak was our left defensive end, Reggie Kinlaw was our nose tackle, and Dave Browning was our right defensive. And we played a 34. Okay. Had Hendricks on the outside on one side, myself on the inside, Rod Martin on the outside. And we had Lester Hayes, and then later we got Mike Haynes. Once we got Mike Haynes, we just locked you down. It was just and then Lyle showed up in about my fourth year, and he brought a certain. He couldn't pass rush anymore. He was just physically tough.
Yeah,
and he was.
Was he crazy?
No, his bark was worse than his bite.
He had quite a bark.
He had a good bark, and he was. That was back in the era. Lyle was juiced up, and of course, he always would say no, he never did anything. I'm like, sure he did. And I saw you. I would dog him all the time about it. That was the one thing about you would love, Bill, was the locker room was a very free, open space, and you said what you meant. And if that's not the way you are, you're not going to be that. But if you are that way, there was a lot of stuff that went back and forth. And there were some guys who did not care what they said. And so Lyle was one of them. If you could back it up, you just spoke. That's what you did. Hendricks was the one. Ted couldn't fight at all, but Ted was very, very smart. And Ted would kind of weigh his words with the people he's speaking to, and he'd deliver a couple pieces of work, let me tell you.
Well,
How he lost, how he could back it up. I could always back it up. So you just said what you said. Rod Martin was another one. So it was one of those things, like, if you want to know where you stand, ask them, they'll tell you.
Well, as a guy who's at that time, I'm a kid and I'm watching it from afar, and all I thought of was that the Raiders were like a biker gang, and I didn't want to come anywhere near them. Their fans were dressed all funky. We knew the players were ready to rip your head off, and they came from this cartoon character like ownership, who had one sweatsuit that he would wear all the time, and he just had, he just had this mantra of just win, baby. And
Yeah.
I'm picturing somebody in the locker room saying the wrong thing, and then this anchorman like brawl breaking out, and there's just stuff flying everywhere. How in the world did the team ever win? Is my question, because
they were dedicated to one thing. That's
yeah.
a great question. That's a great question. But the guys who were in that locker room, I'll tell you, if you ever watched a practice that we had, you would be shocked at how hard we practiced. Every practice was a game. I mean, we just went hard all the time. And so, you take a guy like Marcus Allen. So Marcus, a USC guy, and he was kind of a pretty boy when he came into the league. Marcus was tough as nails. He was one of them. He jumped right in. And that was our culture. I mean, when you showed up for Tuesday, Tuesday practice was tough. Tuesday was off. Wednesday practice was defensive day, and it was like a game. And Thursday was offensive day, and it was same thing. It was hard practices. Those guys, yeah, they ran the streets hard and they practiced hard.
Load management was not a concept in practice back then.
Are you kidding me? The league was so different.
Yeah.
Look, like now they have dietitians and they have cafeterias and they have everything's there for you. I mean, it's unbelievable the way things have changed in that regard. Back then, it was like if we could scrape up a couple bucks to buy some chicken, we'd get a bucket of chicken, and that was it.
It wasn't generational wealth back then, right? It was playing for
no.
Game.
It wasn't. No, not even close.
Did you have a side job off season?
I did not. That was a little before me, because the money started to get good enough that you could. So my rookie year, I got $100,000 to sign. I forget, maybe 45th or something like that player taken.
Okay.
I got $100,000 to sign. It was the highest signing bonus ever in the second round. And then I had to sign a 5-year deal. Well, most guys' careers don't last 5 years.
Right.
So my contract was, I started at $42,500. So I held out, right? I held out because they offered me $42,000. And I went all the way up to the last day of training camp, and I signed the contract. And I'll never forget this. I walked into training camp, and Gene Upshaw was there, and he goes, "You really showed them $500. Congratulations."
Guy who would later go on to be the head of the players union, right?
Exactly.
Your leverage.
You are a tough negotiator. And so at the end of my 5 years, I was making $90,000. Now, in the interim, we won. I was defensive rookie of the year. I had nothing in my contract for it. Al gave me $50,000. And so, and then I made all pro in '83, nothing in my contract for it. Al still gave me some more money. So he always, Al Davis was, if he was on your side, if you played for him and you played hard, he'd take care of you.
Those are the stories we never really hear. We hear the other kinds where he's he's removing money from you if he can. So that's really cool.
Yeah, that was, and that I'm sure, that was not my experience.
Yeah.
He was really good to me. He gave me money when it wasn't even there to be had. Now we argued a lot on not monetarily though. But we would argue with different things. How we were playing a defense or how we wanted to take a guy away, or Al Davis. Al Davis, if football people would love Al Davis. He knew the game inside and out. He had been a coach. He was a head coach. He understood the passing game. He understood defensively. He understood how, what you were trying to take away. He was really, really, I mean, that's what he does. He was a football coach is what he was. And he was also a good business person. So he won his share of the battles he got into in the business world. Of course, he usually ended up in court, but he won.
Well, so now the team starts winning and you're becoming established as one of the best defensive players in the league. When you're racking up the accolades like that, the defensive player of the year and the all-pro teams, and back when the all-pro teams really meant something, including a trip to Hawaii for the, that's not all bad. Then the championship follows, and then it's time to move on. And you, I would think, go through a cultural change pretty big time to go from the Raiders to the Niners.
You would think so.
I'm trying to do my math. Is that the Bill Walsh era? So are you going from like Madden Flores to Walsh?
Yes, except you'd be surprised with Bill Walsh. Bill,
I'm picturing librarian. I'm picturing the professor.
Yeah, and that's what I think he wanted you to think and he wanted you to see. And he was professorial. However, Bill also had a streak in him. Right? He was, he coached for the Raiders, so he understood the Raiders. So he retired the year I got there, and Seifert took over. But Bill was upstairs every day.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would go upstairs and talk to him, and he had his philosophy, and he wanted to present himself a certain way. But when you got down to it, he still had Raider beliefs. Like he's still like, you got to fight your way out of stuff. And you don't take anything from anybody. And this is what we're doing. And this is the 49er way. The 49er way was remarkably like the Raider way, except they said thank you and please afterwards.
You're polite about it. Okay, that's good.
That was about it. But if you had a chance to bury somebody, man, you buried them. And then, of course, a lot of those guys in San Francisco, like Jerry Rice played with the Raiders then. Ronnie played with the Raiders then. Who else played? Rathman played for the Raiders. Roger Craig played for the Raiders. I mean, there was a lot of similarities. So going over to when I went up to San Francisco, what they lacked is what I could give them. They weren't a very physical group up front, and that was kind of my game. And so it was a good marriage. And we went to the Super Bowl that year. We won the Super Bowl. Montana was ridiculous. I hadn't seen quarterback play like that really ever. And a little bit different style, but he was at the top of his game. And heck, sitting right behind him was Steve Young, I was basically his psychologist for 2 years.
You're like, take it easy.
He wanted to play so bad. Yeah. And every day, I'd have to talk him off the jumping point, because he was like, oh, I can do what he could do. It was amazing. Yeah, the youngster I got to know very well, and I love the guy. And of course, he had his chance, and when he's in the Hall of Fame as well.
Yeah. These different styles of offense, defense, and the different philosophies that come from the different teams. I did not realize that the Raiders and the Niners had that much symbiosis where there was the same philosophy and the same guys, because for some reason, maybe they shaved. I don't know. For some reason, they came across as being a whole lot more clean cut. And as you said, sportsmanlike. They would say please and thank you as they were
Yeah.
demolishing you. And did you start to develop maybe not an affection for, but an appreciation for quarterbacks? Because you can't play the position that you started off and that you came in with the Raiders and have any respect for quarterbacks. I mean, your mission in life was to destroy quarterbacks. When did it
Yeah,
kick?
but you could always appreciate what it took to be able to handle that position. That is not an easy. That's the hardest position in all of sports, in my opinion. And if you don't have one, you don't have a shot.
Yeah.
And like right now, look, Detroit's got themselves a real quarterback, and they didn't have to go through the growing pains of developing one, because he already had been through that in Los Angeles, and also he was also had success in Los Angeles. And then when it looked like he was starting to go the other way, they got rid of him, and he goes to Detroit, and he's back on his game. Wow. He's playing exceptionally well. And if you don't have that guy, you don't have a chance in the NFL. And so Jim Plunkett was the number one guy taken in the draft in 1971, I think, or 72, whatever it was, 71. And so he was out of Stanford, and he went to the New England Patriots, and he went up there and they beat the living snot out of him. I mean, they tried to play the triple option with Jim Plunkett in pro football. You've got to be kidding me.
Oh, man.
And they broke that guy and beat him up, and they got rid of him. They discarded him, and he went to San Francisco. He was at the 49ers, and they cut him. And Al Davis picked him up, and he rehabbed him, and he won 2 Super Bowls, and you could arguably say the Hall of Fame career from that point on. He was poor Plunk. Plunk had a shoulder that was, I don't know how he ever played. Every game he got it shot up. It was nasty.
Was it possible to play ball in your era and not be tough as nails? I can't imagine any softies making it through. You're playing on cement turf. You're playing with rules that allowed an incredible amount of physical abuse. I would have to think that from one end of the bench to the other, you got guys on there who would be considered pretty darn tough.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And the answer is not an easy answer, but you'll understand the way it was explained to me was the right way to explain it. And so, because you'd still come around guys and you'd go, really? That's what we got? You got to be kidding me. But really, here's the key, and this is the way it was explained to me. You don't have to be the toughest guy in the world. You just have to be willing to be. And so if you're willing to put the work in, and if you're willing to go through with whatever they ask you to do and stand up and fight, then that's all you have to do. If you're willing to do it, fine. So there are some guys like who are legitimately tough people, like a guy like Howie Long, like Ted Hendricks was not a physical guy, but Ted wouldn't back down from anything. And so he'd stand in there, he'd get into fights, he'd get beat up, we'd rescue him. And they were game. Like, hey, we're gonna all go in there, we're gonna go in there and turn it into a brawl, and he'd be the first one in line. And so it was a great lesson to learn, because there's a difference, right? But being willing to do it, that's all you need.
I have a personal Raider story I'll tell quickly, but for several years when I was covering Super Bowls, there would be an NFL Hall of Fame charities golf outing whenever they were in warm weather cities. And I was in I believe it was Miami playing at Doral in this. And if you're a member of the Pro Football Writers, you could play in this. You'd have 2 Hall of Famers on each foursome. So you had 6 guys out there. The Hall of Famers would always wear all of their rings, so they couldn't play golf at all, but they were out there, and it was so cool. And one of my teammates was Willie Shaw. I think I have that name right. Willie Shaw, Pete Shaw. It was secondary for the Raiders. And I had a tradition by this point of gathering the pin flag off of the final
Willie
hole.
Brown. Are you thinking of
Yeah.
Willie Brown?
Yeah, sorry. Yes. Final hole that we would play. And at Doral, they were locked on. I couldn't get it off. And so I explained to him my tradition was I like to take one of these flags with me. I put it in a nice box. And if you could see to my left, Matt, you would see this wall of these souvenirs. He says, boy, bring me that flag. So I bring it over to him. He takes the divot repair tool out of his pocket. He gets down on the ground and he starts raking it over the flag up by the pole until it frays. And then he pulls it off and he hands it to him and he goes, they can take the boy off the Raiders. They can't never take the Raiders out the boy. And he hands me this flag, which I have to this day. And it's my favorite all-time story. And I thought that culture gets in your blood and you're a part of it forever. Is that still the case when you guys get together? Is it nothing but good old stories and memories and a brotherhood?
Oh yeah. So about maybe 10 years ago, the Raiders started once a Raider, always a Raider. And that is the truth. I mean, once you're in, and you get it. And so they have a very active alumni group. I don't go out there very often, but I have been to a couple of those things where everybody gets together, and yeah, it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. It's interesting, seeing guys how they age and how guys are getting older, and then your turn comes. So we'll see.
Well, it does. It happens for all of us. So Raiders, and then we go to the Niners, and then we go to the Redskins and win again. At some point, you have far surpassed the average career lifespan of a linebacker for sure. It doesn't last this long. What would you say is the secret to longevity like that? And if you could bottle it and sell it, there'd be a lot of guys in the league today making generational wealth who would gladly pay you for a subscription to whatever it was that kept you around for so long.
Yeah, well, what it was genetics. I mean, that's what you get. You just happen to get into the right line, but genetically, I'd been injured. I was never really hurt. So in college, I messed my back up, and then, for all those years, it never bothered me until I was wrestling with my son, and that was about maybe, I don't even know, maybe that was probably 10 years after I retired. And he threw legs in on me and kicked over and popped my back again, and I was in the hospital the next day.
Of all things, yeah.
Yeah, how about it? But no, it never bothered me. I think part of it is a mindset that I think you have to possess, and it's kind of weird, you just got to think you can't be hurt, and you just keep pushing, and that's all you do. I mean, when you're hurt, there's nothing you could do about it. You got to get it fixed. But if you're cut up, or if you're got a couple fingers, look at my fingers I broke my fingers so many times. You just tape it to the next one and you move on. And so, stuff like that, that's just small stuff.
Yeah. Can you help connect us to how family life goes at a time when you are at your physical athletic peak and you are working on high energy, high impact, everybody's watching. This is teamwork. This is locker room. This is fighting through injuries. But you do sleep at home at night most of the time, and you've got to dial it down a little bit. You can't keep the adrenaline running on a 10 on the meter 24/7. What was it like? What is it like? And what was it like going from the the Coliseum back to home where we've got kids, we've got a wife, we've got things that we have to take care of, and we've got to show love, and we're practicing our faith and all of those things. How do you walk both worlds?
That wasn't that hard for me, because home is home, and and the field is the field. That wasn't the hardest part for me was after the season was done, you have a mindset, kind of like I don't know how to explain it. My wife could explain it. I got an awesome wife, so that's the first thing. And she was a competitor. She was an All-American gymnast at Penn State, and then and we got married as soon as she graduated, and so she understood the hard work that goes into it. She understood the mindset you have to have. She was really great with that. But when the season was over, it took me about, I don't know, maybe a month to get out of that mindset and kind of settle back into, regular people life. And then conversely, on the front end, getting ready to go into training camp, there was about a month before I went to camp. My wife used to call it metamorphosis.
Good term. I like that.
Yeah. And she'd say, "Uh-oh, it's metamorphosis time. He's changing." Because you got to get your mind right. The whole thing for me, the whole thing is just mental. The whole thing is, once you get into that mental framework, I could take that piece that needed to be on the field and be that. And I could take the piece that I had to be a dad and do that, and a husband and do that. I mean, there was home time, and I didn't fluctuate that much. The only time I really did was on the weekends. And so, I would come home and she goes, "I can't believe you punched that guy. Why did you do that?" I don't know. Something came over me, so I hit him.
I was down in Texas last week for a golf story, and I was interviewing a couple of guys from the tour, and one of them's on the Champions Tour, and he was recounting shot for shot a tournament that he had won 26 years ago, and he's like, "Yeah, I was on the 11th hole. I had the 7-iron. I had to wrap it around the corner," and I was reminded and amazed at how those moments can embed themselves in our minds forever, and in great detail, like slow motion, vivid detail.
Yeah.
As we kind of wind down our time together, Matt, what comes to your mind when you think about Matt Millen career highlight moments? Is there a couple of plays that just jump off the memory bank at you?
If we would get into games, I could remember them. They pop back, but for the most part, to me, the whole thing was, I just enjoyed. I loved the X's and O's. I loved how. So this is the piece that I miss. I missed the piece when I'd walk in on Tuesday with the coaching staff, and I would sit with the coaches, our defensive coordinator, and I would watch film with them, and then I would be in on putting together the game plan for the week. And so the piece that they always wanted from me was I understood the abilities of our players. And so we'd say, "Hey, we're going to cover it this way." And I go, "No, we can't cover it that way because Judge, or Lester Hayes, Judge is going to do this. I know what he's going to do. So he's going to do this. So why don't we do it this way?" And so and I love that. I love being in on that. And so that's really the piece that I miss the most. There's a million stories from, what happened, when this stuff that happens, like, after the game when, I end up punching a guy in the mouth, and that's the one my wife goes, "Why you punched the guy? Why did you do that?" I don't know. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. I just
Yeah.
But it was, I think more about the X's and O's and that, and then relationships. You see there are guys like Howie Long and Rod Martin and Jeff Barnes and Ted Hendricks and Mike Haynes, and that defense, Lester Hayes, and the games we were in, the situations we were in, a couple of games that you never thought we'd win, and we just found a way to win, and that's what you do.
I have no idea how to wrap my head around the Hall of Fame thing. Your resume is stronger than an awful lot of people who are in the Hall of Fame. There's a lot of jewelry hanging out in the Millen household somewhere, and hopefully in a safe place, that would indicate that you have earned the right to be enshrined in Canton. Does it nag at you? Does it bother you at all?
I don't even think about it. Bill, I was so thankful to play and have an opportunity to be able to play on great teams and be part of great teams. And the role that I served really on all three teams, and it's just my personality. When I got to the Raiders, they needed leadership. So I took it up. And I ran that. I ran that team for 10 years. And I went to San Francisco, and I knew when I got there that this was Ronnie Lott's team, right? When I got there, and I fit in. I knew it was Ronnie's team, but look, I'm running the show up front now. Just stay out of my world. And they knew that that's what they brought me there for. And so that's what I did. And I went to Washington the last year, and that was a little bit different because that was all coach driven. And it was a different way of playing football. And to be perfectly frank with you, I did not like it. And so we won a Super Bowl, and then I decided to retire because I was 35 at the time, and I just like had time to move on. And because I can't play the game this way, I need to be involved. Instead of, we had a defensive coordinator who would I remember we were in a game one time, and I saw what was going on. So I checked out of it, and I made a couple calls, and I got to the stand. We got off the field, and he came to the sideline, and he goes, "What did you do?" And I told him what I did, and he goes, "Don't ever do that again. What if I call it? We run it." And I said, why would I do that? It was a bad defense to be in. So I checked out of it. And he goes, "If we're wrong, we'll be wrong together." I said, "Well, that doesn't make any sense to me." And so I didn't feel like going through that. That was just stupid to me. So I packed it in that year then.
And not too soon thereafter had a headset on and began that career of analyst, which I thought was really well received, really successful. It was kind of carrying on the Madden tradition, and you're still doing that. And I don't know if a former player can get their competitive fix in the broadcast booth, but it seemed like a pretty good fit. Right out of the gate, you're kind of natural at it. Were you surprised yourself at how quickly you adapted into the broadcast?
Bill, nobody ever talked to me about broadcasting. Coach Madden set this thing up for me.
Really?
He said, "Here, go into New York and do this test." And so I went in and I did the test, and we came back, and they sent me a tape a week later, and my wife and I put the tape in and looked at it, and we looked at each other and we started laughing. I said, "That was awful. That's horrible. I wouldn't listen to that if you paid me." And my wife goes, "Yeah, well, it was worth a try. What are we going to do?" And so you just left it go. And then a week later, they called me and said, "You were great. We want you to do it." I was like, "Oh my goodness, you got to be kidding me." So, and then I did it for 10 years. And what you just said is the reason why I left, because it was so empty. You didn't help anybody. All you did was talk. And the people you're talking to, you don't even see. You're there talking to nobody. And so I was like, I should coach, or I got to do something. And then that's when the line job came up. And to be honest with you, I had no idea what that job entailed. And I was not qualified for that job at that current state of where I was. Excuse me. And so, but I took it, and I thought it would be something different, perhaps. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I took it, and it was an epic fail. And so then I went back to broadcasting, and here I still am.
We have a feature that we do every week here on the show called Help Me Understand, where we ask each other usually questions about things happening in sports that just they don't make any sense, and we've been having some fun with that. So let me welcome you in to help me understand here for a quick moment, and ask you, just kind of on behalf of Lions fans, what do you think went wrong in Detroit?
Oh, I wasn't ready for that job. Yeah, that was the first thing. And the second thing was I knew people in football, but I knew them like, hey, Bill, how you been? How are things going? Good. I didn't know them like I worked with them. I've been around them, but there were guys that are really good at their jobs, and you're not going to get them because they're really good at their jobs. So why would they want to leave to come here, right? So I knew a lot of coaches. I knew, and guys I went to, they're solid where they're at. They're not moving. So I can't really put it on one thing. The one thing I would say most of all is it was just I wasn't ready for that job.
Is that something that you I don't know the best way to say it, except I did tell a couple Lions fans that you and I were going to be speaking today, and I asked if they had any questions, and some of those questions I'm not going to ask out of politeness, because there's some hard feelings, I think, amongst the Lions fans. And what would you like those fans to hear from Matt Millen is my question.
Oh, nothing. I have no idea what they would. How many years ago is that already?
It's been a while. We haven't had a lot of success here, so we kind of hold on
Yeah.
to issues.
Yeah. So I wouldn't even know what to address. They would all have specifics to talk about, I'm sure. But,
is it exciting for you to watch this year's team?
Well, absolutely. Just because I know Dan. I mean, I had Dan on the team.
Oh.
And he was exactly what you wanted as a player. I mean, he just was exactly what you want. If we had more Dan Campbells, we'd have won a lot more games. We didn't have a lot of them. So so it's fun for me to watch Dan and see what he's doing up there. And they've done a good job, and they're legit. It's fun to watch them.
So when you see him do a media interaction, are you instantly reminded, oh yeah, that's the same guy we used to have, or has he gotten a little bit different now? He's pretty emotional, and obviously the guys
are
revved up to play for him.
Yeah, he's the same guy. That's exactly how he was as a player. Yeah, that's why I loved him. It's one of those guys you just, like I said, you had a bunch of Dan Campbells, we'd won a lot of games.
Yeah,
it means something to him.
Let me close our time by asking you a question that we ask our guests, and you probably don't get asked a lot of other places. How can we pray for Matt and Pat and the family? What would you like us to pray about for you?
Oh, I wouldn't even know where to begin. We've been so blessed, it's ridiculous. So I would just say I'm fine, to be honest with you. I'm thankful that I am.